Two men from opposite worlds met by chance and discovered that friendship has no boundaries. But what happens when laughter becomes the bridge between loneliness and life? Comment where in the world you're watching from, then let's begin. The early morning light in Paris glows pale blue through the windows of a luxury mansion in the 16th arrondissement. The building stands tall and elegant, its cream-colored stone facade gleaming softly in the dawn. Iron balconies curve gracefully above street level. The neighborhood is quiet, refined, expensive. Trees line the cobblestone streets, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. Inside the mansion, the entrance hall stretches high and wide. Marble floors reflect the soft light from crystal chandeliers. A grand staircase curves upward toward the second floor, its banister polished to a shine. Artwork hangs on the walls, classic paintings in gilded frames, sculptures on pedestals. Everything feels pristine, untouched, expensive. A man sits motionless in a motorized wheelchair near the tall windows overlooking the street. His name is Philippe. He is in his 50s, with neatly combed gray hair and a thin, elegant face. He wears a tailored shirt, soft fabric draped carefully over his frame. His body is completely still. His hands rest flat on the armrests of the chair, fingers slightly curled but unmoving. His expression is calm, distant, his eyes focused somewhere beyond the glass. A woman in her 40s enters the room. She wears a gray cardigan and simple slacks, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her name is Marcel, and she moves with quiet precision. She approaches Philippe's chair, adjusts the positioning slightly, checks the settings on the control panel mounted to the armrest. She speaks to him softly, her voice professional but warm. Philippe's eyes shift toward her, but his head does not turn. He responds with subtle movements of his facial muscles, a slight tightening around the mouth, a flicker in his gaze. Marcel nods, understanding. She moves to a panel on the wall and presses a button. A soft chime sounds. Moments later, another woman enters, younger, perhaps in her 30s, wearing a white medical uniform. Her name is Yvonne. She carries a tray with medications, small paper cups lined up in a row. She sets the tray on a side table and begins preparing Philippe's morning routine. She speaks to him gently, explaining each step as she works. Philippe watches her with the same distant calm. The room fills with quiet efficiency. Marcel reviews a schedule on a clipboard. Yvonne adjusts Philippe's position in the chair, checking the alignment of his shoulders, the placement of his feet on the footrest. Everything is careful, measured, precise. The morning light continues to brighten, casting long shadows across the marble floor. Across the city in the northern suburbs of Paris, the light is harsher, grayer. The buildings here are tall concrete blocks, stained with age and weather. Laundry hangs from narrow balconies. Graffiti marks the lower walls. The streets are busier, louder, filled with the sounds of traffic and voices. A young man walks quickly along the sidewalk, moving with loose, confident energy. His name is Driss. He is in his mid-20s, tall and lean, with dark skin and closely cropped hair. He wears a black bomber jacket over a hoodie, jeans and scuffed sneakers. His hands are shoved into his pockets, his shoulders relaxed. He moves past a group of teenagers leaning against a building, exchanges a brief nod, keeps walking. He reaches a small apartment building and climbs the exterior stairs two at a time. The stairwell smells of cooking oil and cigarette smoke. He pushes open a door on the third floor and steps into a cramped apartment. The space is cluttered but lived in. A woman in her 50s sits at a small kitchen table, sorting through papers. She looks up as Driss enters, her expression immediately cautious. She speaks to him in rapid French, her tone sharp. Driss responds with a casual shrug, moving toward the refrigerator. She stands pointing at a piece of paper on the table. It is an official form printed with government letterhead. She taps it insistently. Driss glances at it, then back at her. She continues speaking, her voice rising slightly. He sighs, picks up the paper, folds it into his jacket pocket. The woman watches him for a moment longer, then shakes her head and sits back down. Driss leans against the counter, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he pushes off the counter and heads for the door. The woman calls after him, but he is already gone. Outside, Driss walks toward a metro station. He descends the steps into the underground, passes through the turnstile, waits on the platform. The train arrives with a rush of air and noise. He steps inside, finds a seat, pulls out his phone. The train pulls away, rattling through the dark tunnel. The ride takes him across the city. The buildings outside the windows shift from concrete blocks to stone facades, from crowded streets to tree-lined avenues. He exits at a stop in the 16th arrondissement and climbs the stairs back into daylight. The air here feels different, quieter, cleaner. He checks the address on the folded paper, looks up at the buildings around him, starts walking. He reaches the cream-colored mansion and stops on the sidewalk, looking up at the facade. He glances down at the paper again, then back at the building. He exhales slowly, shakes his head slightly, then walks up to the front door and presses the buzzer. A voice crackles through the intercom. Driss leans closer and gives his name. There is a pause, then the sound of a lock releasing. He pushes open the heavy door and steps inside. The entrance hall stretches before him, all marble and light. Driss stops just inside the doorway, his eyes scanning the space. He looks at the chandelier, the staircase, the paintings on the walls. He lets out a low whistle, barely audible. Marcel appears from a side hallway. She looks at him briefly, her expression neutral, then gestures for him to follow. He walks behind her, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. They pass through a wide corridor lined with more artwork, then enter a large sitting room. Several people are already seated in a row of elegant chairs facing a low coffee table. They are all dressed formally, suits, pressed shirts, polished shoes. They sit with straight backs, hands folded in laps, expressions serious. Driss glances at them, then at Marcel, who points to an empty chair at the end of the row. He sits, slouching slightly, his legs stretched out in front of him. The others glance at him, then quickly look away. The room is silent except for the ticking of a tall grandfather clock in the corner. After a few minutes, a door opens on the far side of the room. Philippe's wheelchair moves forward smoothly. Entering the space, Yvonne walks beside him, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair. Philippe's expression is calm, unreadable. His eyes move slowly across the row of candidates. Marcel stands beside the coffee table, holding a stack of folders. She opens the first one and begins to speak, reading from a resume. The first candidate stands, moving forward stiffly. He begins to answer questions, his voice formal and rehearsed. Philippe watches him without moving. The candidate explains his experience, his certifications, his availability. Philippe's eyes remain steady. After a few moments, Marcel thanks the candidate, who returns to his seat. The process repeats with the second candidate, then the third. Each one stands, speaks carefully, returns to their seat. Philippe listens to each, his expression unchanging. Then Marcel looks at Driss. She opens his folder, or rather she opens the paper he handed her at the door. Her eyebrows raise slightly. She looks at him. Driss stands, stretches his arms above his head briefly, then steps forward. Marcel asks him about his experience. Driss pauses, then shrugs. He says he does not have experience in caregiving. Marcel frowns. She asks why he is here. Driss pulls the folded paper from his pocket and holds it up. He explains that he needs a signature, proving he attended a job interview, so he can continue receiving unemployment benefits. The room goes silent. The other candidates stare at him. Marcel's expression hardens. She begins to speak, but Philippe makes a sound, a soft exhalation, almost like a laugh. Marcel stops, looking at Philippe. His eyes are brighter now, focused intently on Driss. Philippe makes another sound, and Yvonne leans closer to interpret. She listens, then looks at Driss. She tells him that Philippe would like to ask him a question. Driss nods. Yvonne relays Philippe's question. Why should Philippe hire someone with no experience? Driss thinks for a moment, then grins. He says because he will not feel sorry for Philippe. He will not treat him like he is fragile or broken. He will treat him like anyone else. The room is silent again. Philippe's eyes remain on Driss. Then slowly, a faint smile appears at the corner of Philippe's mouth. Marcel looks uncertain. She glances at Philippe, then back at Driss. She says they will be in touch. Driss nods, holds out the paper for her to sign. Driss thanks her, turns and walks toward the door. As he leaves, Philippe watches him go. 2 days later, Driss is back in the cramped apartment in the northern suburbs. He sits on a worn couch, his feet propped up on a low table, watching television. The screen flickers with images of a soccer match. His phone buzzes on the cushion beside him. He picks it up, glances at the screen, does not recognize the number. He answers anyway. A voice speaks on the other end. It is Marcel. She tells him that Philippe would like to offer him a trial position, 1 month. If it works, he stays. If not, he receives a signed letter of termination for his unemployment file. Driss is quiet for a moment. Then he asks how much it pays. Marcel names a figure. Driss sits up straighter. He asks her to repeat it. She does. He grins. He says he will be there tomorrow. He hangs up, stares at the phone for a moment, then lets out a loud laugh. The next morning, Driss arrives at the mansion carrying a small backpack. Marcel meets him at the door and leads him upstairs. The second floor is quieter, more private. She shows him to a small room with a single bed, a dresser, a window overlooking the street. She explains that he will live here during the week, returning home on weekends. She hands him a schedule printed on thick paper, listing Philippe's daily routine in precise detail. She then leads him to Philippe's bedroom. The room is large and bright, with tall windows and soft lighting. Philippe sits in his wheelchair near the bed, already dressed for the day. Yvonne is beside him, adjusting the controls on a lifting mechanism mounted to the ceiling. Marcel explains the morning routine, transferring Philippe from bed to chair, washing, dressing, feeding. Every step must be done carefully, gently, with respect. She demonstrates the proper technique for each task. Driss watches, nodding occasionally. Then Marcel steps back and tells Driss to try. Driss hesitates, then moves closer to the wheelchair. He looks at Philippe. Philippe looks back, his expression neutral. Driss takes a breath, then reaches for the control panel on the armrest. He presses a button. The chair beeps loudly. He presses another. The chair lurches backward. Philippe's eyes widen slightly. Marcel steps forward quickly, steadying the chair. She corrects him, showing him the right button. Driss tries again. This time the chair moves forward smoothly. Philippe's expression relaxes. Driss grins. Over the following days Driss learns the routines. He wakes early, helps Philippe through the morning preparations, accompanies him throughout the day. He makes mistakes, spills water while helping Philippe drink, adjusts the chair settings incorrectly, forgets steps in the schedule. Marcel corrects him each time, her patience thinning, but Philippe does not seem to mind. He watches Driss with quiet amusement. When Driss accidentally drops a piece of toast on Philippe's lap, Philippe makes a sound that resembles a laugh. When Driss forgets to fasten the safety strap on the wheelchair, and the chair rolls backward slightly, Philippe's eyes gleam with something close to mischief. One afternoon Driss wheels Philippe into the large sitting room. Classical music plays softly from hidden speakers. Driss wrinkles his nose and asks if they can listen to something else. Philippe's eyes shift toward him, curious. Driss pulls out his phone, connects it to the sound system, and plays a track, a driving beat, heavy bass, rhythmic vocals. The music fills the room. Marcel appears in the doorway, her expression alarmed. She moves to turn it off, but Philippe makes a sound. She stops, looks at him. He is smiling, really smiling, his eyes bright. She hesitates, then steps back. The music continues. Driss nods to the beat, moving his shoulders slightly. Philippe watches him, the smile still on his face. One morning, Driss wheels Philippe into a sunlit studio on the second floor. The room is filled with canvases, brushes, paints arranged neatly on shelves. An easel stands near the window, holding a half-finished painting. The colors are muted, the brush strokes delicate. Philippe looks at the painting for a long time. Driss stands beside him, silent. Then Driss asks if Philippe painted it. Philippe makes a sound, and Driss interprets it as yes. Driss leans closer, studying the canvas. He says it is nice. Philippe's eyes shift toward him, something unreadable in his gaze. Driss picks up a brush, dips it in paint, and makes a bold stroke across the corner of the canvas. Marcel, who has just entered the room, gasps. Driss looks at her, then at Philippe. Philippe's eyes are wide, but then he makes that sound again, the laugh. Driss grins and sets the brush down. Days turn into weeks. Driss and Philippe develop a rhythm. In the mornings, Driss helps Philippe with the careful routines. In the afternoons, they sit together in the sitting room, listening to music, watching television. Driss talks constantly about his family, his neighborhood, his friends. Philippe listens, his eyes following Driss's animated gestures. One evening, Driss wheels Philippe outside onto a wide terrace, overlooking the city. The sun is setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air is cool. Driss lights a cigarette, takes a drag, then holds it near Philippe's lips. Philippe hesitates, then leans forward slightly. Driss helps him take a drag. Philippe exhales slowly, his eyes closing briefly. Marcel appears at the terrace door, her expression disapproving. Driss waves her off. She opens her mouth to protest, but Philippe makes a sound. She stops, shakes her head and retreats inside. Philippe and Driss sit together in the fading light, the cigarette burning down between them. One afternoon, Marcel brings Philippe a stack of letters. She places them on the table beside his chair. Driss glances at them, notices they are all in elegant handwriting, addressed to Philippe. Marcel begins to open them, reading each one aloud. They are responses to letters Philippe has sent, formal, polite, distant. Driss asks what the letters are about. Marcel explains that Philippe has been corresponding with a woman for several months. They have never met. She lives in another city. They write to each other about art, music, philosophy. Driss picks up one of the letters, scans it quickly. He raises his eyebrows and says it is boring. Marcel frowns at him. Philippe's eyes shift toward Driss, curious. Driss asks why Philippe does not just call her. Marcel says Philippe prefers letters. Driss shakes his head and says Philippe should meet her in person. Philippe makes a sound, something between protest and uncertainty. Over the following days, Driss pushes the idea. He reads the letters aloud, adding his own commentary, making jokes about the formal language. Philippe resists at first, but gradually, his expression softens. There is something in his eyes, hope, maybe, or fear. Finally, Driss announces that he has arranged a meeting. He has called the woman, explained who he is, and invited her to lunch. Philippe's eyes widen. He makes sounds of protest, urgent and insistent. Driss ignores him, grinning. The restaurant is elegant and quiet, with white tablecloths and soft lighting. Driss wheels Philippe to a table near the window. They wait. Philippe is tense, his body rigid in the chair. Driss leans back, relaxed, sipping water. A woman enters. She is in her 50s, with gray-streaked hair and a kind face. She wears a simple dress, carries a handbag. She looks around the restaurant, her expression uncertain. Driss stands and waves her over. She approaches the table, her eyes moving to Philippe. For a moment, she freezes. Philippe looks at her, his expression vulnerable, exposed. She sits slowly, her hands folding on the table. The conversation is halting at first. She speaks softly, addressing Philippe directly. He responds with the subtle movements Driss has learned to interpret. A flicker of the eyes, a slight change in breathing. Driss translates, filling the gaps, keeping the conversation moving. Gradually, the woman relaxes. She smiles, laughs at something Driss says. Philippe's tension eases. His eyes stay on her, attentive, warm. The lunch stretches into the afternoon. When it is time to leave, the woman stands, hesitates, then leans down and kisses Philippe gently on the cheek. He closes his eyes. She thanks Driss and walks away. In the car on the way home, Philippe is silent. But there is something different in his expression. Something lighter, softer. One evening, Driss accompanies Philippe to the opera. The theater is grand, with red velvet seats and gilded balconies. They sit in a private box overlooking the stage. The lights dim, and the performance begins. Driss watches for a few minutes, then pulls out his phone. Philippe's eyes shift toward him. Driss grins and whispers that opera is not his thing. Philippe makes a sound, something like laughter. During intermission, Driss wheels Philippe into the lobby. Crowds of elegantly dressed people mill about, sipping champagne, speaking in hushed tones. Driss moves through them confidently, nodding at strangers, making space for the wheelchair. People step aside, some with curious glances, others with polite smiles. A man in a tailored suit approaches. He greets Philippe warmly, shaking his hand, or rather, placing his hand gently over Philippe's. He asks how Philippe has been. Philippe makes a sound, and Driss translates. The man looks at Driss with surprise, then nods slowly. He and Philippe exchange a few more words, and then the man moves on. Driss looks at Philippe and says the man seemed surprised. Philippe's eyes gleam with amusement. Weeks pass. The trial period ends. Marcel offers Driss a permanent position. He accepts without hesitation. One morning, Driss enters Philippe's bedroom with a wide grin. He announces that he has a surprise. Philippe's eyes narrow suspiciously. Driss wheels him downstairs and out to a van waiting in the driveway. Marcel appears alarmed, asking where they are going. Driss waves her off and loads Philippe into the van. They drive for over an hour, leaving the city behind. The landscape opens into rolling hills and wide fields. They arrive at a small airstrip. A paragliding instructor waits beside a truck loaded with equipment. Marcel, who has followed in another car, rushes over and demands to know what Driss is thinking. Driss says Philippe wants to fly. Marcel looks at Philippe, whose eyes are wide, uncertain. She says it is too dangerous. Driss asks Philippe directly, "Do you want to do this?" Philippe's eyes move to the sky. After a long moment he makes a sound. Driss interprets it as yes. The instructor helps secure Philippe into a specially designed harness attached to the paraglider. Driss stands beside him, checking the straps, making sure everything is tight. The instructor gives a signal. The paraglider inflates, lifting Philippe off the ground. Marcel watches from below, her hands covering her mouth. Philippe rises into the air, the paraglider catching the wind. The ground falls away. He is suspended above the fields, the wind rushing past, the world spreading out below him. His eyes are wide, his face open, alive. For the first time in years he is free. When he lands, tears stream down his face. Driss kneels beside the wheelchair, grinning. Philippe looks at him, and for a moment no words are needed. But life in the mansion is not without complications. Philippe's daughter, Eleonore, visits one afternoon. She is in her 20s, elegant and reserved. She greets her father warmly, then turns her attention to Driss. Her expression is polite, but cold. She asks Marcel about Driss's qualifications. Marcel hesitates, then explains the arrangement. Eleonore's face hardens. She says her father deserves professional care, not someone learning on the job. She speaks to Philippe directly, suggesting they find someone more appropriate. Philippe's eyes move to Driss, then back to Eleonore. He makes a sound, firm and insistent. Eleonore stops, surprised. Philippe repeats the sound. Driss translates. Philippe wants him to stay. Eleonore looks between them, her jaw tight. Finally she nods stiffly, and leaves. Another complication arises when Driss's younger brother, Adama, gets into trouble. Driss receives a call late one night. He rushes home to the northern suburbs, and finds Adama sitting on the apartment steps, his face bruised, his hands shaking. Driss sits beside him, asking what happened. Adama explains that he got involved with the wrong people, owes money he does not have. Driss takes a deep breath. He tells Adama to come stay with him at the mansion for a while, until things cool down. Adama looks at him, uncertain, then nods. The next day Driss brings Adama to the mansion. Marcel is horrified, saying it is not appropriate. Driss argues that Philippe's home has plenty of space. Philippe, overhearing the conversation, makes a sound. Driss interprets. Philippe says Adama can stay. Marcel shakes her head but says nothing more. Philippe receives an invitation to a costume party hosted by a wealthy friend. Driss insists they attend. Philippe resists at first, but Driss is persistent. He orders costumes online. Elaborate, absurd outfits. When they arrive, Driss unveils them. Matching historical costumes, complete with wigs and accessories. Marcel is appalled. She says Philippe cannot go out looking ridiculous. Driss says that is exactly the point. At the party, the mansion is filled with guests in extravagant costumes. Driss wheels Philippe through the crowd, both of them dressed in their outrageous outfits. People stare, some with disapproval, others with amusement. Driss does not care. He greets everyone loudly, introduces Philippe with exaggerated formality, makes jokes that border on inappropriate. Philippe's eyes shine with laughter. A woman approaches, elegant and poised. She speaks to Philippe warmly, reminiscing about old times. Philippe listens, his expression softening. Driss watches the interaction, sensing something deeper. After the woman leaves, Driss asks who she was. Philippe's eyes grow distant. Driss does not push. Later that night, back at the mansion, Philippe asks Driss to bring him a box from the closet. Inside are photographs, images of Philippe before the accident, standing beside a beautiful woman. They are smiling, their arms around each other. Driss looks at the photos, then at Philippe.
Philippe's eyes are wet. Driss sits beside the wheelchair, saying nothing. Sometimes, silence is enough. One morning, Marcel discovers money missing from the household account. She confronts Driss, her voice shaking with anger. Driss denies it at first, but Marcel produces evidence. Withdrawals that match his access times. Driss's face falls. He admits that he took the money. He needed it to help Adama, to pay off his debts. He says he was planning to pay it back. Marcel demands that Philippe fire him immediately. Philippe listens, his expression unreadable. He looks at Driss for a long time, then he makes a sound. Marcel leans closer. Philippe repeats it. Marcel's face pales. She looks at Driss and says Philippe wants him to leave. Driss nods slowly. He apologizes to Philippe, his voice quiet. Philippe does not respond. Driss packs his things and leaves the mansion that afternoon. Days pass. The mansion feels emptier. A new caregiver arrives. Professional, efficient, silent. Philippe goes through the routines mechanically. He listens to classical music again. He does not go outside. He does not smile. Eleonora visits, and notices the change. She sits beside her father's wheelchair, and asks if he is alright. Philippe does not respond. She takes his hand gently, and says she knows he misses Driss. Philippe's eyes close. Meanwhile, Driss returns to his old life in the northern suburbs. He helps his brother find work, reconnects with friends, tries to move on, but something is missing. He sits alone in the cramped apartment, staring at nothing. One evening, his phone rings. It is Marcel. She says Philippe is not doing well. She says Philippe needs him. Driss hesitates, then asks if Philippe wants him back. Marcel is silent for a moment, then says yes. Driss arrives at the mansion the next morning. Marcel meets him at the door, her expression softer than before. She leads him upstairs to Philippe's room. Philippe is sitting in his wheelchair by the window, staring out at the street. Driss enters quietly. Philippe's eyes shift toward him. For a moment they simply look at each other. Then Driss grins and says he heard Philippe missed him. Philippe makes a sound. That laugh, faint but unmistakable. Driss moves to the wheelchair, adjusts the settings, wheels Philippe toward the door. He says they are going out. Philippe does not protest. They drive through the city, the windows down, music playing loudly. They stop at a park and sit by a fountain, watching children play. They go to a cafe and sit outside, drinking coffee, saying little, needing no words. By evening they return to the mansion. Philippe looks at Driss, and there is something in his eyes. Gratitude, affection, trust. Driss nods understanding. Time passes. Driss continues working for Philippe, but the relationship has changed. They are no longer employer and employee. They are friends. One afternoon, Driss receives news that he has been accepted into a training program that could lead to a real career. He tells Philippe, his voice uncertain. He says it would mean leaving the mansion. Philippe listens, then makes a sound. Driss interprets. Philippe says he should go. Driss argues, saying Philippe needs him. Philippe makes another sound, firmer this time. Driss translates. Philippe says Driss needs to live his own life. They sit together in silence, the weight of the moment settling between them. On Driss's last day, he helps Philippe through the morning routine one final time. They do not speak much. When it is time to leave, Driss wheels Philippe to the front door. He kneels beside the wheelchair and looks Philippe in the eye. He says thank you. Philippe's eyes glisten. He makes a sound. Driss nods, understanding without translation. Driss stands, picks up his bag, and walks toward the door. He pauses, looks back one more time. Philippe is watching him, a faint smile on his face. Driss smiles back, then steps outside into the sunlight. Months later, Driss is walking through the city, dressed in a new jacket, carrying a briefcase. He looks different, more confident, more purposeful. His phone buzzes. He answers. It is Marcel. She says Philippe would like to see him. Driss arrives at the mansion that evening. Philippe is in the sitting room, listening to music, the same music Driss introduced him to months ago. Driss enters, and Philippe's face lights up. They spend the evening together, talking, laughing, remembering. The bond between them remains unbroken. As the night deepens, and the city lights glow outside the windows, two men from different worlds sit together in comfortable silence, proof that friendship knows no boundaries, and that sometimes the people who change us most are the ones we least expect. The music plays softly, the mansion feels warm, and for both of them, life feels full again. He built something to survive, and ended up changing everything. But what happens when invention becomes a second chance? Two lives, impossibly different, became impossibly intertwined, and in the process, both men found exactly what they needed. Not pity, not perfection, but presence. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is simply to see them as they are, and to stay.